My name's Katie, and I decided to do my capstone project on the mind of a criminal and drug trafficking, and I chose to do this topic because I have an interest in both psychology and criminology, and the drug trafficking came in when after speaking with my mentor, he expressed his interest in drugs and experience in working with drugs for the past 4 years. So I decided to do my topic on drug trafficking. So my mentor's name is Sean Sesford, and he is a constable with the Delta Police, currently assigned to patrol. And he's been doing this for 11 years, as he worked 4 years in patrol, 4 years in drugs, 1 year in intel, and 1 year in major crimes, and he's now back on patrol. So for drug trafficking, let's start with what is it? Drug trafficking is an organized crime that entails the selling, transportation, or illegally importing unlawful controlled substances. Heroin, cocaine, marijuana, and other illegal drugs are examples that are sold illegally, with cocaine and marijuana being the most popular drug. In places like America and Russia, drug trafficking is more known to have a kingpin with lower level participants that sell drugs for the kingpins. This is shown a lot in movies and shows and has a common stereotype. In Canada, drug trafficking is viewed differently. In Canada, getting caught could land someone anywhere from 1 to 2 years in jail, while selling hard drugs like opioids and cocaine can get you a life sentence. So in Canada, drug trafficking is basically just dealing drugs, so there doesn't have to be an organized community, it can just be a single person selling drugs. In situations where cartel or hierarchy integrated organization starts dominating the market of drugs, the government and police force use strategies to target the leader. This method has not worked well because even when the kingpin dies, it only limits the impact of the flow of drugs. This ultimately resolves when a new kingpin is announced and the flow of drugs goes back to normal. Drug trafficking has become a common practice in developed and underdeveloped nations. A lot of this stems from the economy we live in, with minimum wage not being a sustainable amount of money to afford basic living necessities. Those who are poor without any concrete ways of living and cannot get any financial aid tend to resort to drug dealing. It's a flexible schedule and easy to earn money, and most people do it not caring whether or not they get caught or not. This is because they have nothing to lose and it's a last resort job. Others go into drug dealing because of ignorance, doing it to impress others and improve their well-being. They also go into this profession without knowing the possible consequences of their actions. So some common behaviors in drug dealers is ruthlessness, power hungry, thrill junkies. They love the thrill of the high of trying to not get caught, love the money more than anyone and anything. They lack accountability when things go wrong. Most times they're drug addicts themselves and do it so they have enough money to supply themselves for their own habits. They don't care who they hurt or what they do. They think that they're above the law. They think that they're smarter than everyone else. They lack friends, grow up around drugs, and have been abused and neglected as children and turn to drugs as a way to find oneself. What behavior police look for in drug dealers and drug trafficking? Drug trafficking and organized crime definitely appears to have a trend in how suspects behave. They try to use techniques to evade police, and as a result of that, we start to detect these behaviors as indicators of crime. Although the drug context is more about learning about the patterns of where they go, who they associate with, and what they do with their time, you are searching for individuals that are in a criminal organization and their role in it. You are trying to figure out the structure of the criminal organization and their associates. Who's the boss? Who's the lower level? Where do they keep the drugs, guns, or money? Where do those drugs go, and where does the money go? Police study their movements and assess the best approach to stop dealers and convict them. They need to know as much as possible before heading into a big drug bust or undercover situation, not only for their safety, but so they can get it done and arrest the right people. This doesn't always go as planned, but they put their safety above everything else in these kind of situations. In recent events with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, there was an expectation there would be a decrease in drug trafficking due to the new restrictions. This assumption was proved wrong, as cartel and drug dealers found ways to get around the restrictions and didn't suffer any loss in profit. Customers would communicate with their dealer through apps like WhatsApp, either through text or calls. In the beginning, dealers would still meet with their customers in public, but it was reduced a significant amount due to the curfews put in place for some countries. When the dealer and the customer couldn't meet, they would deliver the drugs to an organized location, and payments were made electronically due to the fact that customers did not fully trust their dealers to have it be sent to their house. During COVID-19, there was an increase in drug purchase through online websites that acted like an online clothing store. You put your drugs of choice into a shopping cart and paid online, and it was delivered to your house in a few days. Doing this, people found that there was a significant price decrease for the drugs that they wanted, and it felt the same as the expensive version that they got from their dealers. Drug prices didn't fluctuate during the pandemic as most people assumed it would. In the very beginning, there was a small decrease in price that quickly returned back to normal as dealers assessed the situation. Drug trafficking organizations strengthened their structures and networks by adapting to the external factors that they faced. They were able to operate as if the pandemic didn't exist, and they were really successful in doing so. Now, to get into the mind of a criminal, forensic psychology is the subfield of forensics that studies the psychology of crime and their suspects. Their main focus can be consultations, investigations with suspects' mental health, at which they provide their findings in a court of law without letting their personal morals interfere. The psychology of those who become drug dealers, or those who get involved with drugs in general, have some sort of childhood trauma leading to it. Children who grow up in a household with addicted parents, either drugs or alcohol, tend to resort to these behaviors such as a coping mechanism to fill the empty voids that their parents left behind. Growing up in an environment with drugs always in their presence can find it very difficult for those people to get out of those situations, and they end up becoming a dealer because of growing up in those environments. Looking into the history of a suspected drug dealer, you will most likely see some sort of abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual. Most often, they were neglected as kids and turned to dealing to get a feeling of oneself. Recently, behavioral theorists have come out with theories as to why someone would turn to crime. While each individual has their own reasons and life situations that lead to crime, there are other reasons for it. Biological risk factors don't necessarily mean that criminals are born to commit crime. Just some psychological disorders like schizophrenia can influence a person into committing a crime. Adverse childhood experiences where children are raised in bad situations like getting abused, exposure to drugs and alcohol, addicted parental figures, sexual abuse influence how a child will act in the future. In recent studies, research has shown that convicted criminals are more likely to have experienced some sort of childhood trauma than someone who wasn't exposed to such situations. Who we are around really influences who we are and who we become as a person. Being in a high crime neighborhood or area can increase the chances of someone committing a crime. This isn't the only influence though. Living in poverty can significantly increase a person's willingness to commit a crime. The overall thing that I learned from this project not only was a lot about drug trafficking and the behaviors behind it, but also the fact that I have a higher interest in criminology than I thought I originally did. And I've taken this opportunity from this project to potentially pursue criminology as a career in the future instead of my other choice, which is really helpful because now I know that this is something that I would actually do for the rest of my life and not something that I would do as a whim. Thanks for watching. Don't do drugs.